in 2024, where young people in particular have an attention span of about 10 seconds, it's a pretty tall order to say, okay, here are two interconnected versions of the same album. There are two narratives that bleed into each other.
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy at GhostCultMag.com. We are once again honored to bring in the legend, Ihsahn. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm very fine, thank you. And you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Great to see you once again. We've chatted several times over the years, going on 12 years of Ghost Cult, and we've featured you as a solo artist and with Emperor, and it's really terrific to see you. Your solo...
Appreciate that.
Of course, your new solo album, self-titled, is out now, finally, on Candlelight Records. Seemed like we were one of the longer teases of a record. It seems like the release times of records are shortening, but I appreciate that you gave it sort of a very long lead time in, the end of last year into now. And I think there was a lot of singles and nice visuals and a real opportunity to fans to kind of like ease into the material and not get shocked with it all in like, a month.
Well, I think this is of course collaboration between myself and the record label, and of course they have also have Darren Toms, my longtime collaborator and friend with Candlelight, has a lot of great ideas. How to kind of present things, my forte is probably the musical side when it comes to the kind of visual side and everything. I'm very fortunate with people having great ideas and really great collaborators. And given the kind of duality of this whole project with these two versions and everything, I think it was, to put it bluntly, in 2024, where young people in particular have an attention span of about 10 seconds, it's a pretty tall order to say, okay, here are two interconnected versions of the same album. There are two narratives that bleed into each other. So I think it was a good idea to kind of present it, a bit part by part, leading into. But I'm very pleased now that it's out. It's been quite an ordeal to get everything together, but all the more gratifying too.
Of course, and when you're so close to your art, I'm sure it's like the birth of another child. It's a very long gestation process, and then it comes out, and then there's all the other things that go with it. I do want to give a shout out to Darren Toms of Candlelight. We worked with him for a very long time, and it's great to work with Candlelight and their associated labels and other PR reps and everybody. We're very thankful after all this time to.
Amazing team. I mean, I too must thank everybody who's been involved in kind of bringing this album into the public. It's been a lot of hard work for not only for me but for everyone else. And just the videos alone, shown from Loki Films and everybody who was involved. Costin Chernow with the visuals for the orchestral parts, he did an amazing job. Rich Josarist again, he just absolutely nailed the artwork. We had such a good time when he came to Norway for a few days. It was just, and we went over all kind of conceptual ideas, and he's, a master of kind of interpreting the music and the conceptual ideas into visuals. So it's so gratifying on so many levels.
Right on. I love to hear that. And of course, just to catch people up in case they're just coming into this interview somehow cold, the new self-titled album has a proper album and also an orchestral score that goes along with the album that is a partner, let's say an equal partner.
I like how you said a proper album and this spin-off.
Well, I mean, they're both. I meant to say that the album.
I'm just joking.
You can always joke with me. I like jokes.
No offense.
No offense to you. They're both proper albums, but what I meant was like the main album and its partner. It's equal.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot, because this is where my interest lay, is we talked a lot. I had a classical upbringing in music at first before rock and heavy metal and other kinds of metal, death metal. And I always felt like you approached all songwriting like a score, like composing, just in your own way. Whatever instrument came to you, that's what you started with. And it's not a surprise that you would do a full blown orchestral accompaniment to your album, and by itself it is beautiful and stands on its own, and I think has a lot of meaning just by itself.
Thank
And
you.
I wanted to, like, it's quite an undertaking in my opinion to do this. So is this just a time in your career? Is it just the inspiration came to you and this is what came out? How did you begin this idea that this would happen?
No, I mean, as you've been, kind to follow, my different albums and some of the more experimental things that I've been doing over the years. Prior to the pandemic, I was, just about releasing two different EPs. A Telemark EP, which was like very old school, and a Faroes EP, which is kind of all in the, more pop oriented, experimental. And I was kind of like into the two outer corners, if you will. So during the pandemic and everything, I got to do a lot of other projects. So when I came back to writing for another full length album, I guess I came to a point where I wanted to focus on something down the middle of what I've been doing. Rely on the kind of core elements that's been with me since the very beginning of my career. And, for if you boil it down, like distorted guitars and black metal screaming, and accompanied by some sort of orchestral soundtracky, is kind of at the heart of what I've been doing. But I wanted to take those, but I always feel I do my best work when I have like one foot in a safe zone, on dry land, and the other foot in chaos, where I'm kind of still trying to push myself. And usually I try to push myself by bringing in other elements, foreign elements. But this time I just wanted to see if I could, elevate the elements that I have been playing with and try to, also some of the core elements of, what's been my inspiration. A lot of that from since the beginning was the soundtracks, horror movie soundtracks. So I kind of gave myself an opportunity to try to write an imaginary orchestral score within the context of a metal record. And literally, the basic idea was simple. I wanted to, because I've been doing a lot of orchestral elements. Usually, a lot of this more subtle details of that work gets lost, in a dense metal production. And I thought, okay, if I try to make an arrangement that goes through the whole thing and arrange it in a way so that it will support, the metal production, and also in such a way that if you take all the metal away, it will function as its own thing. That was kind of the challenge and the kind of the puzzle that I had to put together, amongst a lot of other elements that went into it. But
Nice. Thanks for unpacking all that. I know what a fan you are of movie scores and just in general, as am I. I know one of your inspirations. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan, but I've also loved that Publicity Materials mentioned Bernard Herrmann, who I'm obsessive about. I know most people will recognize his stuff from The Twilight Zone in the '60s in America, but I love the soundtrack to like his '70s movie scores, like Taxi Driver, which was a little more avant-garde jazz and things in places, but it had to be because of the material. But
but it's, people often associate him with the more abruptness, like your Twilight Zone and like Hitchcock, with Psycho, probably one of the most famous scoring things ever, and it's brilliant. But then that kind of variety, as you say, the musicality that it showcases in Taxi Driver, it's just like it's so different, but still, with that bringing out all the tension and all that. And I mean, doing a lot of press now, like for those who are, if you kind of look at it too closely, a lot of people think that, so how do you think that orchestral music and metal music can go together? And to me, it was. I always felt it went well together. Because in my opinion, a lot of orchestral music, and in particular, movie soundtracks and metal, they're trying to achieve the same thing. It's usually kind of big, grandiose, the existential, people in, humans at the very on the very edge of extremity. All exciting stories are people who are put into some kind of extreme condition. There's a turning point. And the confrontation with the darker sides of existence. It's kind of to achieve the same thing. Wouldn't you agree?
I do, I do. I think along the some lines you can find heavy music in anything you want to. So I always was drawn to in the school days. We were schooled on Wagner and Beethoven, but also like Grieg and Dvorak and Berlioz. And I was like, these are glorious pieces of music that could like feel like Iron Maiden, or they feel like
Yeah.
Black Sabbath, or they feel like Cannibal Corpse, or they feel like Emperor. So it's not a big stretch for me, but I think for some fans may not realize that Emperor was, your influence with Emperor was one of the things that brought this kind of movement into underground extreme metal.
No, but I think it's usually because it's really just because of the image of things. Because we choose, to view metal as this kind of beer drinking maniac kind of people who do it, solely, and then we associate orchestral music with people in suits and gala dresses and some kind of intellectualized, people staring down their nose at everybody. In my opinion, unfair. If you just someone like Bach, who of course people are intellectualizing, like being very old, and myself included. I mean, because it was genius. If you see like the Volltemperierte Klavier, he wrote that with all the modulations in awe of the technology and the temperament of the new scale and the ability to be modulating like that. This was like at the peak of technology in some sense. Breaking with the tradition of music as it was. He changed music, as we knew it, as you have other people who have done later. And in my opinion, musical genre is oftentimes, because this is a very general observation, but oftentimes a matter of instrumentation and arrangement. But a good composition, whether that is a country song or a pop song or a metal song or a great orchestral arrangement, a great song is a great song. And if the core idea is really good, it's quite surprising how flexible you could be with the arrangement.
That just reminded me, one of my things that I like to say often is when it comes to children and young people, to judge very slowly their musical output because, a lot of factors. But obviously, I'm glad that people did not judge Bach or Mozart slowly.
Yeah.
Because, they were prodigies, and, it's things that Mozart made as a child are still with us, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's fair to say that you took a lot of risks on the EPs, and the albums, I think, are a little more thematic and unified. I think that's fair. And I do, at the same time, I do feel like all these things are every new album's a culmination of whatever just was. So yeah, Telemark was incredible. I like the other releases, but now I feel like this is new but also familiar at the same time. I know that's very cliche, but it doesn't.
Thank you.
It doesn't
I
not sound
appreciate
like
that.
you. It doesn't sound unlike you.
No, but I think that is also some from people's questions. Sometimes they assume that me experimenting with music and doing what is untraditional for someone with my background, and that it's is like when I brought in saxophone in my music, for example, and 8-string guitars, like, oh, he's trying to provoke people who listen to this kind of music. And stuff like that is never in my mind when I create music. I mean, the reason I even at 16 had gone through the stages from Twisted Sister to through Maiden and Judas Priest to Metallica and Slayer and Morbid Angel and Ihsahn to Bathory and Celtic Frost was, of course, an impulse for me to seek out the extremities. I wanted more, and this is still the case. I this is my excitement for making music as selfishly as a solitary experience, and this is the only thing that I can do. In order to kind of honor the humble fact that people actually listen to my music, and makes, as a consequence, I get to do this as my job, But if I started to write music on the premises of what will people think, then you kind of, it's like people ordering food. This is not the case. I just make stuff to the best of my ability and make sure I myself am very, very, very excited, and hopefully just as excited about making another album now as when I was 16. And that is the only way I think I can put out something that might translate to people and make people enthusiastic about listening to it. It's kind of what you put in is what comes out.
Good to hear. I also was going to say, I wonder, because you're such a noted live performer, and putting on touring has been such a big part of what you do. When you were conceiving and composing these tracks, did you envision, obviously some of this will be performed live, perhaps all of it will be performed live in totality at some point in the future? Is that how you did you just approach, I'm making the record and the record lives on its own, kind of?
I made it as at the moment of writing, I was mostly concerned of just making the compositions, within those kind of dogmas and parameters that I set myself for the album, and that it was most crucial for me to make this kind of dual side of things functional, in a proper way. But I think as a consequence, as I said, I've been rehearsing all day. There's this pre-production and rehearsals all week, because I'm very soon doing my first live show, including the new material. And I think as a consequence of making music that was already in its sketch phase, kind of very planned out, not really dependent on a certain sound. I feel, and we talked about this at rehearsal today as well, that the new songs actually lend themselves very well to the energy of live performance. Which is like just we all the people I play with are experienced musicians, so we can kind of have a very open dialogue. Like this song, it works on the record, but might not be, in the live scenario. It differs. But the songs that I picked out, I think are really good contenders for the energy that I associate with live performance. But at this point, just to answer your question, at this point, I do not intend to play the entire record. I would say it's totally doable, and perhaps down the line, but it seems kind of counterintuitive to do it as at this point, before people actually get to absorb and kind of get to know the songs. I would think such a thing would be more valuable over time, after some time, to maybe do a special occasion for that, when if people connect with it, then it becomes, people are more familiar.
Right on. We'll put it out into the universe where maybe you can get commissioned for this down the line. Inferno Festival in Norway, or Beyond the Gates or Roadburn. One of those seems like the right place for something like this, and just obvious to me. But yeah, all fair. And naturally, again, as you were composing, we'll talk about vocals and lyrics for a second. Over time, very few artists get the opportunity to really have many lives as a composer, as a songwriter, and touch on many things. And you've been able to really develop over your whole career, different lyrics and different voices, and do what the song is called for emotionally and lyrically. Is there anything coming into this record that was driving you personally on some of this subject matter, or is just more of what you're just used to doing?
Ironically, almost, since it's a self-titled album, this is, I think, even some lyrics reflect that, in like the distance between us and such titles. It's I think both consciously and a bit subconsciously, at this point in my career, I feel a need to distance my person, the creation, because I think there's such a big tradition for interlinking the artist with the art, especially in our genre, or in any, style of more modern music, where the artist is so kind of integrated with a song, is kind of deeply connected to one person singing it, etc. So this is actually the first time I deliberately wrote at least try to write from a different perspective. So I kind of wrote very simply, but like a synopsis for a novel, in just as a backbone for the lyrics, and the lyrics are kind of scenes throughout the full story. Again, it's really archetypical characters, very classic story building. There's nothing, no reinventing of any wheels here. But it was kind of satisfying to write it into a different perspective. Obviously, there are, of course, you can't, as with the music, you can't really get over just being yourself and bringing all your own experiences into the words and into the storyline. But it was my attempt to try and take more of an observer slash director role rather than necessarily me having to be at the center of it. And I think that maybe this is a consequence of just, the industry and the world has changed since I started out. The private element of the artistry was, it was still private. And then there was, art out there. I compared to when I saw Iron Maiden the first time, just like, oh, I'm in the same room. I'm in the same building. I'm breathing the same air. That was part of the experience. Whereas these days, there's such an interconnected, like, oh, I'm going to watch my favorite artist live tonight. Like, wonder what they had for lunch, and you can go on social media. It's like it. I think it kind of muddies the perception of what we're actually there for. But maybe this is just mad ramblings on my side. I don't know. But I've compared it to, like, if you're a Star Wars fan, George Lucas is, of course, the creator of that. But you don't expect him to dress up like Darth Vader and lurk in the background of the scenes. You know what I mean? That would get in the way.
It would be weird for the actors. And by the way, I live in the Bay Area, so Skywalker Ranch is not far from where I live. And
Okay.
and there's also a big Star Wars museum near my house. Interestingly enough, it's fun that you talked about this, because this reminds me of a topic from a friend of yours, a recent conversation I had last year with Devin Townsend, who talked about the same thing. There's so much media sort of demanding from artists, like, give me more. And he's like, no, I don't want to give more. I want to give everything I have musically and give everything I have to the stage. And then when I'm done, go home to my family and not talk to any of you or look at you or be hurt. I don't want to share everything what I had for lunch. And he feels. Oh, go ahead.
I couldn't agree more.
And he was, yeah, of course, and he was saying, like, that part, having to continue to cater to this, actually kind of spoils it a little for him. He's learning to live with it, but he doesn't love, like, he loves creating and he loves sharing. He's been doing a podcast and a video series also, like you, but he doesn't want to give everything. Like, for some stuff you have to keep for yourself, and I really love that. And of course, you both collaborated together. Actually, one of my favorite videos that I have ever seen is the two of you performing together on the 70 Tons of Metal cruise, like 15 years ago, 14 years ago, performing Jular together. I'll go back to that clip over and over. I love that song. I love Devin, and I love the two of you together.
Thank you. I mean,
yeah,
Devin is a great friend, and a lovely person. And also so inspiring in his honesty, and literally it's been helpful for me too, because I think we come from a very similar place. We may have done very different things, musically, and but every time we talk, I think I always feel like there's a connection in our relationship to why, and the motivations, the ambitions for why we do what we do. And and I also feel he's never, like myself, never had this kind of driving force of being famous, or the attention or anything. That is like a consequence of doing music that he loves. And also, in my book, he is extremely gifted on so many levels, whether it's vocals and guitar playing and production. He seems kind of limitless in his abilities. And then to talk to him and say, like, he also faces the same imposter syndrome as the rest of us, and is frustrated with all the stuff he doesn't know, and failures and everything. It's he he seems to be human after all.
We all are, and to a plus and a minus, we all are human. And yeah, Devin is wonderful, and I've been again also very fortunate to spend some time with him over my career and follow his career. It's been lucky for us, but there is some similarities I think between yourself and him. It's obvious to me. At the same time, I think it's interesting. Similarly, like Devin and other artists, when you have a certain modicum of success or infamy based on your earlier work, maybe that chases you around and you have to get distance from it to create new and different things to satisfy yourself. Because I feel like even like with touring, the Emperor shows most recently in the States were so limited and special that I think like people were ravenous and traveling from all over the world to come see you here in the States because you hadn't played a lot here, whereas you're a little more available to European and Eastern European audiences and maybe elsewhere. And I think it's the same thing. I think people are still chasing Devin for Strapping Young Lad and
Yeah.
and Devin Townsend Project, and but at the same time, just like you've been able to like transport your audience to this new place. Like, come with me on this journey, and occasionally we'll get back to that other stuff. But this is what I'm all about now, and I think that's, as an artist, very interesting to examine. A little bit under the
But it
microscope.
can be, that can be a bit tricky. In the beginning of my solo career, it was tricky because in some way you feel. I felt I was doing the same thing. I was putting just as much in and like literally doing just continuing in some way the same kind of work I was doing, and then in this mixture of what the logo was, it feels like there's there's uh, there's all this nostalgia. So as a consequence, I think since I was arguably I was very young, when we ended Emperor. We started Emperor when I was 16. I was 25 when we called it quits. And since then, but already then, people have been, so nostalgic about the phenomenon that was Emperor, and it's a much bigger deal now than it was when we were actually active, and this is just the nature of things especially when it comes from an underground, scene, and it just takes long for it to be more common, I guess. But I'm not complaining. I mean, I've grown attached to music that I grew up in. I think it's even scientifically that music that you listen to, get attached to between 16 to 27 or something, it does something. It sticks with you in a different way. And if the way I think about this, if I was part of music that people have a similar relationship to than I have with my favorite artists from that time, that's great. And I feel that when we go out and play with Emperor, and we were in Latin America for the first time just last year, and and suddenly there are like literally thousands of people on the other side of the world who know all the words. They know every small detail of all these songs. It's amazing, and we're there to kind of experience that. We of course have a long relationship to these songs because we made them when we were that age, and it's kind of a culmination of experience and appreciation for something that we found meaningful in our lives, but obviously if someone else found it meaningful, I don't I don't think I really have to compare the two and be like, oh, they're all about my old band. Or I think anyone in my situation who got to be in a well established band, albeit underground, and quit that and still be around, who gets to do that? So I feel double blessed in that regard, and I can appreciate what we do with Emperor and what that is all about. I'm proud of what that is, but and I totally understand that people may have a deep connection with that from that time. I cannot be expected to. I'm still, fortunately, I'm not consumed with my own work in the past. I'm always, that's kind of teenager in me still kind of searching for making the best record yet. So I think, and for me, it's easily for them the two to coexist. And I can't believe I have to pinch myself sometimes. I get to do both.
Lucky for you and lucky for us indeed. I just have one last question for you. You've been terrific as usual, as always. I love that you shouted out your many collaborators and how special it was to work with them. Is there anybody still on your bucket list you haven't worked with that you would like to in the future, that maybe you could recruit in the future for the next, whatever the next thing is?
It's hard to say because I've been so fortunate to And usually the collaborations that I've been part of, it's been rather random. Like the things that I've worked with Devin on, for example, since you mentioned him, is like, and he told me the reasoning. Of course, he comes from a different world than Emperor, and names and stuff like that doesn't mean anything to him. He's much more practical and in touch with that, which I truly appreciate. But he was aware of my music, and he literally told me that when he wrote Jular and was singing the song, this would sound great with Ihsahn's voice, the character. So it's like he thought of like a textural element, like he would choose a guitar sound, like, man, I should have a Telecaster on this riff. It seems like it was something like that. He asked me, I would of course be, I was happy to contribute. And as a return favor, I had a chorus on my next record, like, would you have a go? I think that would sound amazing with him. It was like an interchange of things. And I did sung a song for Jeff Loomis's solo album. He did a solo for me. It's just like friendly interchange of, can I say, like colors, musical colors that we get to share. And as for, of course, there's things on my bucket list. I someday to finally, finish this project that me and Rob Halford have talked about for years. Stuff like that. But it needs to be real. I think there are a lot of collaborations, not necessarily happily, but like people suggest to me, like, oh, it would be amazing if you and this person would do something together. Oftentimes, I think it looks good on paper, but people have to remember it has to be a chemistry. For musical collaboration, it's not about names or kind of intertwining logos. If I'm not meaning to be rude here, but like there would actually have to be like a common ground and like a spark that happened naturally. It can't just put two things together. Does that make sense? My next bucket list, of collaborations is if I meet, a fellow artist in some kind of project, and there's really a joint passion vision that you feel is something new. So I don't have any names, even though I have a lot of people that I respect and look up to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel me doing anything with them would result in something that was meaningful and worthwhile.
Well said, and a great place to end. Thank you so much for everything. This new album is wonderful. I really appreciate talking to you once again, and we look forward to the upcoming tours and festival season for you and whatever else is coming next, sir. I'm sure we'll be paying attention and ready to chat it up with you if time permits. Thank you so much for your time once again, Ihsahn.
Thank you so much for the support. Pleasure to talk to you again. And thanks to everybody. I look forward to seeing people on tour. I think this will be great fun. I mean, rehearsals are going well, and it feels good. It feels good to perform these songs live as well.
Can't wait to hear them. Thanks for hanging with Ghost Cult. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.